As above, so below.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Dr. Bernard Beitman, MD, and I like to tell people I'm a psychiatrist, and I still am. I'm doing private practice with some patients. I like studying interpersonal relationships within a controlled setting like psychotherapy. It's very educational, not just for the patient, but for me, because one of the only ways to be in therapy without being the patient is to be the therapist, and the patients try to help us too, because the more they help us get better, the more we can help them. So that's a nice part of it. I have a book out called Meaningful Coincidences, and you can order it online or at your local bookstore. Our question for today, my question for today is, can meaningful coincidences, synchronicity, be glitches in the matrix? Can they tell us how the matrix works? And what I mean by matrix, and our guest will be talking about simulation, is simulation. And he'll tell us about the problem with the movie The Matrix and his idea about what the simulation actually might be. But I like to think of coincidences as they have been for human beings much of our existence on this planet as clues to how reality works. And if the reality we're in is a simulation, then the clues of synchronicity are how that simulation or that matrix might work. One clue about which ones to pay attention to, which coincidence to pay attention to, is the time interval between the two elements, usually, of a coincidence. The shorter the time period, the more likely right there something has happened. And if we can get more deeply into that something, maybe it'll tell us what's going on around here. Because I think probably more people than ever now are trying to figure out what the nature of reality is. I like the term, the nature, mother nature, what is it, reality? What is going on here is a lot of big question for a lot of big people, a lot of people wondering about it. Now, I have a little bit of an idea about a simulation. I think there may be two different ones going on that are related to each other. I think there's one that is like going on in this three-dimensional world, and there's also one that we can make up, kind of like a virtual reality that Facebook tries to give us, but we can make it ourselves, and we can make that movie just kind of how we'd like to, and find people who might want to be in that movie. Now, I have a particular predisposition, liking for cartoons and musical comedies. And I do like to sing whenever I get a possibility. And I have a lot of fragments of songs that I like to come up with, and I like to laugh. And I think being here on this earth, part of the fun of it is to learn how to find places where you have a good time. That fun and figuring out stuff is like what's going on around here, like kids do, is like having fun and being curious is like basic to all of us. And as adults, we get squeezed into, I'll call it the matrix, and have to focus on being certain ways and lose that curiosity drive that a lot of us have still somewhere in us. So the question today that we'll be talking about is, are we living in a simulation? And it's not a bad way of thinking about things, but just what role do meaningful coincidences play in these experiences that we might call part of a simulation? Well, our guest today comes to us from the other side of the world, from Virginia, where I am, in India, is Sujith Ittan, who's an engineering graduate student and an information technology services professional. Keep in mind, he's an IT guy. So he does he does something to do with programming. He hadn't told me what, but I mean, these programming guys have to know what's going to happen what they want to have happen and get the program to make it happen. And so they have to have a vision and then a method to make that vision come out. So these guys are already creating realities with their pluses and minuses and zeros and ones. And we can do something similar to that without having, well, people are getting better at doing their own programming themselves. So we may be learning how to program from guys like Sujith, and listen to him, because we want to hear not only what he says, but what he thinks. He lives with his family in Bengaluru, India. In addition to his day job, he is passionate about hobbies. He actively updates his digital art library on his TV app, PixArt, and his book, The God System Game, which you just may happen to notice is over his left shoulder, also happens to be in my hands here. The God System Game. I mean, the game thing is really important in all this. I think we are playing a lot of different games around here, and we got to define what game means. But that's a lot of fun with game. Where this one comes in, this God thing, I don't know. It's confusing in here for me about what God is in this, and he's got plenty of ideas about God and the simulation, and you can read about it in his book, but we're not going to get into the God question very much here, I hope, because it gets really confusing to a lot of us about what that term actually means. But you will be introduced to the idea of the relationship between meaningful coincidences and a simulation that we might be in. He explores the reasons synchronicities and meaningful coincidences might be there. Give you a little hint. He thinks they're there provided by the simulation, and he and I are going to have a little discussion about that. His conclusions, as you will see, are that he thinks we're in a simulation. So welcome to the show, Sujith.
Thank you so much, Bernie. Thank you for having me on your show. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah. Let's go into one of your favorite coincidences just to start with.
Yeah, so this happened when I was 15 years old, when I was in the 9th grade. My mother, she made a prediction, or maybe to motivate me. She said, next year when you finish the 10th grade, it's a big deal for us in India when we finish the 10th grade, because we finish a school. And then, she said, you're going to get a top in some class, and, in a subject in the class, and you're going to go get a prize. And I said, no, I'm not the top student in the class. I'm not that great. My sister, the younger sister, she's the smart one, right? That's not going to happen. And what happens is that, I finished the 10th, and I very unlikely, on one of the subjects, I get the top score. And I do happen to go and, get the award. So this happened. So, and my best friend, who happens to be my best friend in school for many years, right? He was the one who actually scored the top in that subject, but his result was withheld for some reason, right? But I got the prize. In a sense, my mother made a prophecy or a precognition, or whatever we want to term it, right? So that was sort of a coincidence, I would say, that happened, and that stuck with me for a long time. I did not, worry too much about it, Bernie. It's just that, in the last 2 years, I've seen that so many coincidences, they just keep happening, and there is a pattern. And once there is a pattern, you can't ignore these things, right? So that's what got me into, trying to identify synchronicities and meaningful coincidences in my own experiences. I found Carl Jung's book on synchronicity. He's the one who coined the term, right? And I also read your book, Meaningful Coincidences. And it's a pretty fascinating area, so that's where I will end for now.
Good. What your mothers plant ideas in our little brains. They really do. And there is a desire for us boys to please our mommies. And so there is a motivation in us to want our mother to be right, and to please her with her rightness, as well as with the the actual outcome. So she planted it in your mind. And coincidentally, I was talking to somebody where I was the guest on the podcast, and the same thing about the parent or the mother planting an idea in the child, and it happened, and it looked like a precognition, as yours did. But there's more to it than just predicting the future. There is a kind of agency. There is an agency of you in there. Now, how it was that your best friend's score didn't get included is the glitch in this story, because he should have gotten it. It's not about your mother's prediction as much, or maybe it is. Maybe her this is where, when you talk about the simulation, your idea of the simulation is that they create whatever they is. They create these coincidences for you. So this is one of those things that's a mystery. Your mother's thing is a little more understandable to me. Your friend's score was excluded, and that's one of those things that the simulation could pick out and throw away somehow. What do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's in the simulation viewpoint that I take in the book. I do seriously take into consideration that the system, that's the God system game, the system that is creating the simulation, they have a role to play in this. And I call synchronicities and all these other dreams, visions, revelations, serendipity, simulpathity, right? All these terms as leaks from the system. So these are leaks from the system onto our minds. We are all, you and I and everybody else, we are all connected to this one system, which is the computer simulation, perhaps, right? We don't have to really understand what sort of technology it is, whether it's a computer or something else, right? We can be agnostic about it. But there is something that is going on, and that is the source of these what I would say mind manipulation or leaks or synchronicities that we experience as meaningful. It could be life changing, it could offer a deep meaning, it could be motivating, it could be warning signals, it could be in some cases negative, right? But like you have mentioned in very detail in your book, so that's how I see
now what I hear in what you said, and you have a lot of ideas, and I'm trying to get to the basics of your ideas, because you have a lot of stories and you just went through a lot of potential details, but the key word to me is leak.
Yes.
Now, leak means in three-dimensional reality means there's a hole someplace and the water gets through or something gets through. So a leak is almost something that is not purposeful.
Intended.
It just happens.
So
I want to know about, because I'm talking about leak, you're talking about leak, I'm talking about glitch. You're saying that I think that the leak is somehow purposeful.
Yes.
But if it's a purposeful leak, it's not a leak to me. It's somehow, but how is it?
It's from our perspective. Yeah. So Bernie, from our perspective, it's a leak. But from a systems perspective, so you have to look at it from 2 points of views. And I mean, that's how I'm looking at it. So the system. So imagine, this. Let's say this system is the personal God. Okay, and it's giving one blessing to you after the other. Right? It could be a meaningful coincidence. It could be a precognition. It could be something that happens in a real time. Right? Anything. Right? It may be guiding you. Right? It is, and it has a plan, right? And it gives you these sort of clues or leaks or coincidences over a period of time during your lifetime, right? It knows when to give what at what point in time and to what kind of personality, right? And I believe that all of us are connected to the system. If we are in a simulation, all of us are, right? That's our reality, right? And if that is the case, that means all our minds are being controlled or influenced. We can say, and I believe that's speculation. I believe that we have our free will. Okay, even though we are simulated human beings, we are simulated human beings with free will. Okay, so the system does allow us to be who we are, And on top of that, it gives us these guidance or things like that. And the analogy that I've taken in the book is also that it's like the relationship between a parent and a child, like a 2-year-old toddler and an adult parent, right? The parent allows the kid to move around, play, right, within boundaries, right, be creative and explore. But the parent is always guiding and protective, and the parent can intervene, can allow the kid to play the way he or she wants to do that. So that's the way I look at it. So to answer your question, it's not really a glitch or unintentional. It appears to me that it is well planned. It's part of the grand design. And we are the recipients of that from time to time. And we really do not know the exact nature and the reason why these things come to us, right? That's why they say the God is mysterious, right? This is God's plan, or this is a sign from the universe, right? Depends on what kind of language you want to use. So that's how I would answer that.
Well, from what you just said and from what I got from the book,
Yeah.
and what bothers me about what you're saying is that you're using words that are a basic Christian idea about God. A beneficent being who is looking out for each of us.
Yes.
And so I don't know the difference between the simulation and people's idea of God.
Yeah. So let me answer that question then. So God, right? The way that God, we are all, born into a family that perhaps, follows a religion, right? I have one, you may have one, everybody has one, right? I was born in a Christian family, and that's how it has been. And the idea of God is, told to us. We don't experience God really, but we are told that this is the tradition of our ancestors and so on, right? And so that's how we inherit the idea of God, and we get into the rituals and so on. Now, according to me, as I'm 45 years old now, right? So I have found something that I have to say about God, right? It's my relationship with God. I have to explore and I have to come up with my own ideas, right? I think everybody has the right to do that, right? So God, according to me, I can look at it in two ways. One is as a creator of the world, right? So according to science, we see that Big Bang is the beginning of our universe, right? What happened before the Big Bang? Who did that? Who is responsible for that? Is it a God? Deistic people say that, God kickstarted creation and he left the scene, right? So that's the creator God. Now, I am not really worried about that God. That part of God is, is somehow out of scope for me in the book. And the second God that we all think of is the personal God, right? The personal God is someone who interferes in human affairs, right? Listens to our prayers, interferes in our lives, does good things for us once in a while, right? Blesses us, give us promotions in a job, money, comforts, a good spouse, children, happiness, whatever, right? And sometimes even tests us. So that's the personal God. So there's a creator God and a personal God. So these are the two separate gods that, in my view, exist, or we can think of. The personal God is what I think the simulation emulates. Okay, so that's what I'm getting at. So if we are, subjects in the simulation.
Wait a minute. The personal God is emulated by
the simulation. Yeah.
The simulation. What's the value of equating, in your way, simulation and God?
Because okay, so let me give you another viewpoint here in terms of how the simulation itself, in my view, could have been created. Okay, so think of the Big Bang. Universe happened in a physical, real universe. Okay, the Big Bang happened. Stars formed, galaxy clusters formed, and all these elements were formed. A solar system is formed, and in a habitable zone, we have the magic of evolution start, right? And 4 billions down the line, we have human beings, right? Human beings, they create technology, they mature, right? And they reach a point where Nick Bostrom, the philosopher, he talks about technological maturity, right? So human beings reach a technological maturity and they create a simulation, right? They create a simulation using computers, brain in a vat, biomechanical, electronic, AI, whatever that is, right? They create a simulation, right? That
And what
simulation,
you just listed was
yeah.
what sounded to me like 5 or 6 different forms of simulation. Is that what you just listed?
No, I'm just talking about one simulation. So that's just one. I just talked about a timeline. So at the end, so the place where they create a simulation, right, from a physical universe, that is what I call a base reality. So in a base reality, there is no simulation. So a simulation starts after they have built some technical platform from where a computer simulation or some sort of technology, right, creates a world like ours, and we are all part of that world. So yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm
Mm.
slow.
Okay.
So and you're fast.
We
What
can go slow. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
somehow there is a base reality created, and in that
Yeah.
base reality, technology develops.
Yes.
Human beings develop the technology, but
Yes.
then you go to simulation somehow, and I don't know that leap from creating technologies that we have now to have recognizing we're in a simulation.
Yeah. So that is the thing, right? So we have a base reality, right? And after we have reached technological maturity, the human beings, they create a piece of technology and create a simulated world. Okay. And that world,
And so human beings create a simulated world. And
yes,
so we
yes,
have artificial intelligence, and then we have virtual realities.
yes, yes,
And so
yes.
when you talk about human beings creating a simulation, it sounds to me like you're talking about virtual realities.
Yeah, we could consider our simulation to be a virtual reality experience. Yes, you're right. Absolutely.
So
And
we
that's
are,
why the game element, God system game. So we are in some sort of a virtual reality game, and virtual reality and simulation are similar synonymical terms actually.
yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
what.
yeah, yeah,
But there's a link I'm trying to
yeah,
understand
yeah,
between Facebook creating its
yeah,
own virtual
yeah,
reality, this
yeah, yeah.
meta and
Metaverse.
a metaverse, and there's so many other metas out there. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
hardly the first one. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
Second Life was one of the early ones where people could enter and take on a new identity and become and
yeah,
meet
yeah,
new people by having an avatar that they
yeah,
could manipulate and pay for and have things happen and go to
yeah.
conferences and stuff like that in this
Yes,
virtual reality. So that was an early simulation of
yeah,
regular reality. So
yes,
here we were creating these virtual realities, as you're saying, but I'm
yes,
trying to be able to get from our creating our own virtual realities here
yes.
to the virtual reality that we're living in.
Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, so we start from a base reality. Our human descendants, right? They create a simulation. We are part of that simulation, right? And we have lived, say, for 5,000 years.
Wait a
Okay,
minute,
let's assume.
somebody's created this 3D real.
Yes, yes.
This
So,
one
so
we're
let
in now has been created. Okay.
yes, yes. So we
Okay.
are in a simulation. Okay, so we
And
are.
who and we're trying to talk about who created it, and you have several different ideas about who created the
Yes,
simulation.
yes.
But what I think is important, you say it really fast, but us slow
Yeah.
guys got to get it, that within this simulation that was created for us to be in,
Yes.
we also have created simulations.
Yeah, so let me answer that question. So we started in a base reality, not we, our our people who created us, okay, in a physical base reality.
Oh, no.
They
So
create a
we is
simulation.
well, we is not us. We
No,
is
no, no,
some
we is not us. No, no,
we
no, no.
we does sound like us, that's
Ah,
English
okay.
language.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that then. So there are these base reality human beings who existed in the physical universe. They create a simulation. We are part of that simulation, right? And let's say that this simulation has been running for 5,000 years, just for the sake,
All right, just for our pictures. I mean, I know you've got a lot of ideas, but this is I've been studying this and I'm a little new to it. But our audience doesn't know this stuff. So, and you are really into it. So we got to slow you down, because somehow there is humans somewhere, somehow. Were in some base reality, which of course we have to ask how they got there. Were they in a simulation too? The ones that started the base reality, because you can go, let me use the term meta. You can keep saying, well, you got a base reality here, but who created that? So you're in trouble for me in trying to say that there was human beings before that were in a base reality, but then they created this one. So we'll leave it that way, but we have to ask who created them, or how did they happen too? Because the metaphors have to continue to, they have to continue. Because what if I do it, you do it, if it keeps going down and down. But I want to get away from that, and we'll say that somehow another brand of human beings was created or came around, and this advanced group created the simulation that we are in right now. That's what you're saying, I think.
That's what I'm saying. And you are right to point out that people criticize the simulation hypothesis by saying that, oh, if we are in a simulation, who created us? They could have been simulated, and so on. It's running to infinity, and we could create our own simulations, and that simulation will create another simulation. So this is a nonsensical idea, right? But I don't think it is necessary to do that, Bernie. I think we can start, and that's an assumption I make, and there are different assumptions we can make. It's there in the book, and right now I'm just trying to create a base in our discussion right now, right? So I'm taking one timeline. I'm saying there is a base reality, maybe human beings, not us, some human beings, superhuman beings, like you mentioned, created a simulation. We are inside that simulation, and inside the simulation, we are sort of living a virtual reality world, which was similar to the base reality, right? So, and in our simulated world, we also have VR experiences, like you mentioned. You talked about games, right? Car racing games, or any of those games, or the metaverse that is being rolled out soon, perhaps in the near future, right? So when right now in our simulation, we are at a place where we are able to understand these technologies. We are able to build our own version of simulations, right? And because of that experience, we are able to ask ourselves, are we in a simulation, right? We could be in a simulation, and maybe somebody created us. Right?
Because we can create a simulation, therefore maybe somebody created the simulation that we're in now.
Exactly. And look at the video games that we make, right? I'm not much of a gamer, but once in a while with my kids I play them, right? And the car racing game, for example, and they are far better than me, right? So when I play the car racing game, you know what to do. You have to try and win, right? That game is very similar to the real game that happens in the real world, whether it's F1 or any other NASCAR or whatever, right? I'm not into that either, right? I'm just saying that the games are a copy or a reflection of something real, right? So that's where I say it, and that's where I think the link that you are looking for, right? If we are in a simulation, right, the world that we see, the reality that we see, right, and there are philosophers and people who have questioned that what we see is an illusion, it is fake, and so on and so forth, right? But what I'm saying is one of the possibilities is that what we are seeing in our simulated world, right, is similar, and it's inspired from a base reality.
It's so our simulation is similar to the base reality that from which we came.
That's an option. Yeah. Because yes, that's an option. Go ahead.
And that my basic assumption, which I've tried to mention to you before, is that that coincidences are clues to how reality works. That's my perspective, has been for all along. Part of the reason I study coincidences is that for their clues. So this may be similar to say that the simulation that we are in tells us something about the simulation from which we were created.
Yeah. Yes.
Because there's a metaphorical analogical thing between this one and that one. So what is that? If I understand you correctly, what's the value of knowing that?
Could you elaborate that? What is the value of knowing what exactly? That we get these meaningful coincidences
Yeah,
from the
this is
simulation?
hard. This is hard. It's hard for each of
Yeah.
us to understand each other.
Yeah.
It is. You have your views, I have mine. That's why we have to slow this down.
Yeah.
You, like the car racing analogy, you
Yeah.
suggested that the reality that the thing we call reality, which is to you a simulation, is somehow an analog to the base reality that created us.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what you said.
That's correct. Yes.
So what's the value of knowing that?
What is the value of knowing that? That's a good question. So let's look at it from a different perspective, right? Why did the base reality people create a simulation? Right? Isn't that a better question to ask, right? What is their purpose, right? What do they want from us?
Purpose I'm all for purpose. Go ahead.
Yeah. So again, since we are inside a simulation, and if I'm inside the simulation, I have no way of knowing the mind of the creator who created us. So we have no idea what they are using us for. Some people speculate that it's purely for entertainment, right? They are somehow finding some entertainment value from us. Maybe they are playing our games, right? Maybe right now somebody is controlling you and somebody is controlling me, right? From the base reality, right?
That one of my favorite images about that is just imagine some teenager in some other dimension is playing a game with these apparently free will entities and trying to be able to make some guess about really what's this free will entity is going to decide to do, and then plan ahead for that to see if they're right. So it's a more complicated version, but that's one of my favorite visions of what the simulation is, that we're part of a game, and we're playing a game here too. We're playing a game here too, which is like, what is going on around here?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a game a lot of us are trying to play, and that's where I use synchronicities as a way of my way of doing it is following the synchronicities. Okay, so why did they? So one reason we might be created is like your kids got a car racing game, they get to do a human being playing around more complicated game, and so that we are a game to another, let's say, higher consciousness.
Possible. I mean, I list I think 10 or 12 reasons in my book, but I don't again, I take this a little seriously, Bernie. I don't think the creators, I hope I'm right about this. Okay, I could be wrong. Maybe they have created this for a serious purpose. Maybe we are not just some video game for them. And that's where I think I differ from the Matrix movie, right?
Well, let's talk about the difference between simulation, as you're talking about it, and the Matrix, because that's very important, because a lot of people know simulation from the movie The Matrix.
Yeah, so I love the Matrix movies. I really enjoyed even the fourth version of it that came out recently. Watched it multiple times. I think the fourth one is less action, more what do you say, intellectual, I think, and that was very enjoyable to me. So in the Matrix, I think one great thing that the movies has done is that, the franchise has done is that it shows that, the idea of a simulation is a possibility, right? And the fact that we are inside a simulation, and it gave us that language, right, that we can talk about it. We can have our differences from the movie or whatnot, and we can create different, ways to interpret the movie, and create our own stories, for example. Right. One of the things that so we see in the Matrix is that the machines have what do you say, enslaved the human race, right? And they are using human beings as a source of their power, power meaning battery power, right? As a power plant. Right, that's what, and they give us this wonderful world where we can live, where everything appears real, uh, but they are, at the end of the day, sort of villains, right? They're just
They're
using us.
robbing us of our energy. We're energy
Yes.
sources for them.
Yes, yes. And we are in these human pods, right, where we are just lying down there. We are connected with these wires. And when Morpheus saves Neo and shows him the reality, and that's a bad reality to be in. And that's why they seek freedom, right? And they leave the Matrix and so on. And they hack into the Matrix and all that happens, right? So that's the Matrix movie. In my view of the simulation, right? I don't. It's not that dramatic, really. In the movie, The 13th Floor, right? There's another movie where this idea of a simulation is, and that's slightly more, what do you say, aligned to the ideas that I have in the book, which is that the base reality people, they create a simulation more or less similar to the world that they have, and they are in some way using us for something positive, right? They are caring for us, and I speculate that there is something that we can give back to the base reality civilization, right? And there is something going on back and forth, right? uh, and that's what I believe,
Well,
Bernie.
that's a lovely idea, really.
Yeah.
It's a heartfelt idea, and I can feel it as you say it.
Yeah.
That there's some positive interaction
Yes.
between the base reality, which I hope you get a better name for, and this one, because it ain't base; it's pretty elevated, at least from our perspective. But
Yeah.
that basic reality, more fundamental reality, I think is what you mean. And there's an interchange between us here and them.
Yes.
And that will get to the real question, one of the questions about why they seem to care for us. Like,
Yeah.
why did they hide your best friend's score so that you could like feel lots of things and wonder how that happened. I mean, that
Yeah.
your mother is one thing, but that was the key thing,
Yes.
that
Yes.
score didn't get included. So you have to think that somebody took that out of there, or somehow they took that out of there, and that was for you. So you have a sense that you're being cared for
Yes.
by this. By the base reality simulators of the
Yes.
reality of the simulation you're in, and that's very the beneficent God kind of thinking.
Exactly. Yes.
There is an old idea that God needs us as much as we need God,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that was a perplexing. That's a perplexing idea that
Yes.
God finds out about himself. We say him,
Yeah.
her. I think God's a
Yes.
woman anyway. So
Yeah.
it's like we can do all kinds of pronouns here, but
Yeah. Yeah.
God finds out about their self
Yeah.
through our experience of
Yes.
our ability to observe ourselves and observe what's going on around us.
Yeah.
Well, is that part of what you're saying of
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you summarized it very well, Bernie. In fact, that's why I have, dedicated a lot of pages in my book to religion. In Genesis, there is a verse which says that, God made man in his own image and likeness. uh, when I look at that verse from the point of view of the simulation, it's really amazing, and that's why I term it as a leak. When we say that a religious scripture is inspired by God, that's what I mean. In some ways, the simulation creators, our base reality, civilization, perhaps human beings, they have influenced human minds inside the simulation, right? And they have inspired us to go in a particular direction uh, once in a while, right? So God made man in his own image and likeness means that perhaps this so-called God and personal God and we human beings are similar, which means that the base reality beings and us are perhaps the same. So that's the idea.
Wait.
Yeah.
Base reality and us are the same. So we are the ones who have created the simulation we're in, but we don't know it.
Well, we are not exactly. I mean, even even though we are human beings, right? We are right now inside the simulation, right?
Yeah.
So we are far lower in terms of technological maturity and advancement, right?
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, it's not really base; they are far higher, right? So those guys out there, they know everything. They are perhaps thousands or 10,000 or maybe a million years ahead of us. I don't know, right? We have no idea of getting that information really. So they are far ahead of us in this game.
So
You talk about
let's talk.
yeah.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
how we're valuable to them,
Yes.
and how they may nurture us through
Yeah.
meaningful coincidences sometimes to
Yeah.
be able to continue doing what we're doing. So how
Yes.
do we help them?
Okay. So one of the things again, so the again there's no way of knowing, right? If they have built a system and we are inside the system, there's no way that we can guess exactly what is the reason they built
I
us.
don't agree with
But we can
that.
speculate.
I don't agree with that. I think
Okay.
the coincidences are clues to what they're doing with us. But that's where we differ.
Okay.
So
Okay,
keep going.
fine. Yeah, so I'll come. I would like to understand that point, but let me finish my thread.
Oh,
So
please.
yeah. So what I think is that in our simulation there are clues in religious scripture, for example, right?
Yeah.
What do they need from us? So one of the things that they say is, if you lead a good life, you have a soul, right? There could be an afterlife. Right. For example, in the Christian belief, you can enter the kingdom of God. There is a heaven, right? If your name is included in the book of life, right? You get to be in the kingdom of God, where God lives with the people, right? So that's the aim. In the Vedantic tradition, we have a similar thing, right? The earth is a middle level planet, there are higher level planets, and then there is the spiritual planet, right? Where God resides, right? And the objective or the goal of the human life is to live a good life, right? Purify the soul, move from one life to the other, and reach the spiritual planet. That's the journey, that's the outcome. Now, in my book, I have speculated that if could that be the purpose from a point of view of the simulation, right? Maybe there are our simulation is just one level in a number of simulations, right? And we could, for example, once we are done living this life in this simulation, move to a different simulation, right? It depends on what the system does, or the beings, what they decide to do with us, right? There's a possibility that we live in different simulations. There is a possibility in the book that, and here I get very creative, right? There is a possibility that if we are in a simulation and we are digital human beings, we could be resurrected in a physical base reality. They could do that, right? And the reason I say that is because even though we are digital human beings, we could have a digital DNA, which in some technological way, right? Maybe it sounds like science fiction, right? But there is a way to use that to create a new human baby in the base reality, or we could be resurrected in an adult form in the physical base reality. So
Yeah.
those are
Yeah,
possibilities that
that's
yeah,
I prefer that speculation to a lot of the things that I've heard you say. I think I
yeah,
think your creativity is going in the right direction. That you shouldn't be afraid of that far out imagining, because that's what human beings can do. We
yes,
can imagine things, and we
yes,
can help through our imagination, as your mother did. Help that imagination helps things to happen. So what
yeah,
you just said is an
yeah,
important part of what may be going on here. The DNA be a
yeah,
programmer for a digital or another form of this cyborg version of the combination of computer and human being or machine.
yeah,
This is where it's very important
yeah,
to tap into your imagination, because in your view, your imagination is also being stimulated by the simulation. Your ability to do that is factual in the sense of the simulation creating everything that we're doing around here. So I ask you to be much more confident about what your speculation is. And I think the biblical verses have to be updated. We can't keep saying, oh, no. In all the different religions, these guys, they tapped into something, no question about it. But we're now in a different phase, and this phase needs requiring religious ideas, very useful, but also putting together with the advancement of human consciousness and technology that we've got now, and that's going to create a whole new kind of narrative that's going to be related, but it's very different. And you're starting to talk about that, but I want to bring you to the question that bothers me most of all this stuff in the simulation. Is the movement toward destruction of humanity by humanity, the suicide of humanity. In India, you know this very well, with the smog, the overpopulation, a number of deaths that are happening, but it's happening all over the world now, where we have devastated our nest. We're destroying what could be a really fun thing, because I think we're here to have a good time. And I think that heaven on earth could be right here if we knew what we were doing with ourselves. So how do you put together the base reality guys making this simulation into such a huge conflict here that we are devastating our earth and ourselves?
Okay. Good point. So let's let me look at this from a base reality point of view. Let's imagine that there are human beings in the base reality, right? They have similar problems, right? In their planet, right? They run out of resources, maybe climate change, or
okay, that's good. That's good.
Right?
Keep going. Yeah, that's good.
Right? The exploitation, right? Overpopulation, like you said. And maybe that led to some sort of crisis in their reality, right? Is it possible that they had to leave their home planet to look for some other home, right? We don't know that, right? So
let's hold it right there. I think the point I'm hearing just from what you have just said is that this simulation is kind of like a war game, where you play out what might happen, so that they could be in a difficult situation like ours. And they want to see how we can handle it with positive inputs from them, but they don't know what they're doing either. They just know we've got kind of like maybe help these guys along. Maybe they can figure it out, and then but if they can figure it out, we can see how they do it, and we can apply that to us.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the purposes that I list out in the book. And that is like they are doing some sort of research on us. Okay. And that's exactly what you hit on, Bernie. So, but what are they researching on? Are they researching our vaccination histories, our medical history, right? Cancer? Are they researching, how our, say, for example, DNA mutates or something like that? I don't know. Right? How our political systems emerge, right? How our economic systems emerge, right? How at what point in time do our natural resources just give up, and there is some sort of chaos in society, right? It creates societal problems. It could also want to find out what happens when there are some of the things that happen in our society these days, right? Whether it's transgender politics, right? Abortion issues, right? Same-sex marriages and so on, right? You never know, right?
You can make that list, and I think you're right to do that. But what I'm getting from what you're saying is that there are a lot of variables going on here that they could be studying, and that you just mentioned. But the biggest variable is we're destroying ourselves, that we're looking at the 6th major extinction, which is going to include us. So they could be looking at what happens when we blow ourselves up and how we reconstitute ourselves, hopefully on this planet. in a way that maybe they can see how they would have to do and plan for that, their devastation, and plan for what they will do, seeing the mistakes that we might have made.
Exactly. That is a possible option, Bernie. You're absolutely right, and I agree with you. Again, there's no way, and we can only
we don't
imagine.
know. We don't.
Yeah.
Please,
Yeah.
we both know we don't know.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that we can imagine.
Yes.
And
yes.
I am learning more and more that imagination under the right conditions, and it has to be the right conditions. You have to be careful. You have to be analytical. You have to test out the possibilities just in your own mind as you're making up stuff. Or could it be real?
Yes.
You made an analogy between car racing on the computer and car racing in reality. That's all I'm doing here. Is like, here's this, we got this one racing towards death of humanity, and maybe there's something else going on out there. It's too good an analogy to not pay attention to. Now, there's a lot of things that you mentioned that they could be watching. But I'm a psychiatrist. I'm very interested in human minds, the minds of people. I'm interested in the mind of humanity, which I called in part the psychosphere, our mental atmosphere, which you saw in my book, that we all share this thing, and that there's a lot of stuff going on in this mental atmosphere, which I'd like to get some computer guys to help me figure out all the stuff that goes on there without having to go into like far reaches of things, so that our explorations of our planet and our own minds could be serving a value for them. And the biggest problem for me on this planet is we don't know how to get along with each other. There's too much conflict. We don't realize as a group that we're all part of the same thing. And the value of the simulation perspective is to say in a different way that we're all in this together.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, I fully agree with you. Carry on, Bernie. I didn't want to interrupt you.
And then by being in this together, by having this outside force, let me say, saying that we're all in this being maneuvered by this outside force, allows us to say, hey, they're out there, we're in here, and we're all part of this. And so it becomes a way to organize humanity under one umbrella as separate from the base realities of people who are creating this, and together try to figure out what we need to do about our potential sixth major extinction, killing ourselves in this slow way. And that could be, and I like the idea that you're suggesting, it could be a way for the simulators in the base reality to study what they need to do in order to be able to do something more positive for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely, Bernie. And you know, some of the problems that you mentioned, right? That we are, using up our resources. There are so many conflicts here, right? All sorts of problems are there. But I believe that if we, with our free will, if we are able to, behave well, this simulators or the so-called personal God, right, like entity, they may help us. They may help us, with technology, right? At the end of the day, I believe that simulation is a technology. Human beings are really good, at creating technology, right? And that could be, at the end of the day, the key to our survival, right? The technology at the end of the day is the tool, but the good and evil in us, in all of us, in humanity, right? It's important that we enhance the good and keep the evil in control, right? So that we can continue this party for a much longer time. And I believe that if we behave well and if we move in that direction, these the simulation creators or the beings that are managing us will help us. That's again my belief.
So in your previous analogy, if we're good kids, we'll get some candy or something positive. Well, I think you're right, generally speaking, and defining what being good is a problem that I am trying to be able to resolve, and that is there's something about a development of ourselves and our own consciousness, and the
Yeah,
opening of our hearts to each other, as well
yeah,
as being careful with what we're doing with each other. So our cognitive abilities are continuing to get strengthened, and a
yes,
continuing connection to our own intuition, because intuition is a way of knowing stuff without knowing how we know it. And there's a
yes,
lot to be able to know, like your mother might have known something without knowing it. Uh,
yes,
and knowing how she knew it, she wanted it, but she may have known it. I've heard that yesterday too, knowing something in a way, but also having other information. I
yes,
want to be able to help human beings expand to super consciousness, which is a
mm,
vague term. I want to help people define their own personal, people call it superpowers, but their
yeah,
own the gifts, their own capacities that are unique, special, that can
yeah.
help us put together from this puzzle of our disparate selves an organized humanity that can work together and be separate and have a good time here.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with you, Bernie. And I think I'm not in the psychology, game therapy and psychiatry. I read some articles. I like the subject, and I think some of you, based on whatever I've read and watched, right? You use these coincidences and you help people, right? Understand, and that helps them. And I think that's a great thing. Yeah, that's awesome,
And
really.
that's part of what the simulation is providing for us, is what
Yes.
using coincidences as a way to
Yeah.
continue to evolve, and
Yeah.
also being careful about which ones not to
Yeah.
pay attention to and which ones to ignore.
Yeah.
Um, well, this we're going to have we've come to the end for today, um, and I like being able to talk with you because you are representative of technology. You understand what it is to program something. What kind of IT work do you do?
Well, I am in an IT consulting job right now. I work for a company called Kyndryl, right? And I'm not really a programmer,
Well,
but I'm a tech. Yeah,
you
yeah.
understand programming. You got to, but what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm right now working with my team to create new offerings and solutions for our customers, right? In the networking and edge, technology area. So that's where we are in. We provide the IT infrastructure solutions, right? Connecting different places, networks, data centers, and so on, right? So that's the sort of area in the IT field that I'm in.
You're a connector.
Yeah. Yes.
We need connectors.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
doing it in a different way, and the parallel between mental connection,
Yes.
which I see as telepathic,
Yeah.
and be able to increase our telepathic capacities in a structured and useful way, is not
Yeah.
unlike trying to make the technological connections. They're both kind of strange to anybody from 50 years ago, but telepathy is real. I have models for telepathy,
Yeah.
how it might work. And I'm sorry we didn't get to that, but that might be something that you would be interested in. I have a bit of that in my book too. Uh, but
Sure.
you're a connector, but you understand technology enough to know that programming makes stuff happen. And you got to write
Yeah.
the script first before you can have the thing happen. And that's what I'm doing with writing books. It's a script. So I thank you very, very much, Sujith, to being with me today. It's I love the computer IT kind of ideas. It's not what I have, and you think that way. And having a contrast between the more psychologically oriented and IT kind of person is, I hope, very useful to our audience. So I thank you very much for being on my show. And uh, here's his book. It's pretty long. He's got a lot of speculation in there, as you've seen, but this conversation may help you understand where Sujith is going with all this. So any final comment you'd like to be able to make to us?
I'm good. I'm good, Bernie. Thank you very much for inviting me on your show. I really love talking, to you today, and through you to the audience, right? And if there is an opportunity to talk again, I would love it. Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.